Gunpei Yokoi was one of Nintendo's most important people. He originally just joined as a factory worker before moving up the ranks to be in charge of his own development studio. Here, he brought the Game & Watch concept to life. They were a series of LCD handhelds, each one featuring a different game and often with a different design too. They were very primitive though, with just basic pre-rendered drawings which would turn on or off depending on the gameplay. Despite the simplicity though, they were so much fun to play, and they still are to this day. After the success of the Game & Watch, he helped create the original Game Boy. But for this video we're going to keep moving forward, and as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, Gunpei Yokoi actually left Nintendo in 1996 to go and start his own company called Koto Laboratory. Rumour has it that he left Nintendo on bad terms after the failure of the Virtual Boy. But as a translated interview from 1997 reveals, that was not actually the case. The actual reason that he left Nintendo is very interesting, and it seems to perfectly fit with his own ideals and his future career path at the time. According to this interview, when Yokoi turned 55, he was always planning to leave Nintendo and start his own company regardless of what had happened. And the reason that he actually thought about leaving Nintendo around this time is very interesting, and it seems to fit perfectly with his own ambitions. This is from a bit later on in the same interview, where he talks about wanting to go back to his roots and creating more niche toys, using a concept that he'd actually pioneered back in the Game & Watch days, which was called lateral thinking with withered technology. Basically, this means taking old and cheap technology and repurposing it in a new and engaging way for a new audience. And so, from there, in September of 1996, Koto Laboratory was formed, and it was here that he could spend some time experimenting with new toys and smaller niche ideas. One of the first things that they set about creating was some more LCD games, going right back to Gunpei Yokoi's roots. But unfortunately, as I'm sure you're all aware, just 1 year after starting his own company, he tragically died in a car accident. But thankfully, during that year at Koto Labs, 2 of his projects did actually get released, and I've got them both right here. So, the first game that I've got here is called Kunikun Echio, which at first glance you might think it just looks like a simple Snake-style game, but it's actually a lot more unique in its approach. Rather than just having the static food that appears in the maze, in this game the food that you collect actually appears along the side of the playfield, and it moves around until it enters the field. And then once it enters, it keeps moving in that direction, and if it touches the opposite wall from the wall where it came in, then it's a game over. So you have to guide the snake around and eat this food that's constantly appearing from the top and the sides of the screen, and you have to try and intercept it with either your mouth or with the tail of the snake. And of course, as well as that, you've also got the regular rules of Snake to watch out for as well. So you can't touch the walls yourself, and you also can't touch your own tail. It's a very unique take on the concept, and it works surprisingly well. And the second game here, and one that should be a lot more familiar to you, this one is called Professor Heno Heno. And in this one, you control the little professor character in the screen, and you basically move lines up and down to connect them all the way across the grid, and then they'll disappear. It's a fresh idea on the puzzle genre, and apart from the buttons on this console being extremely small, making it just a little bit awkward to play, it is still really fun, even in this small LCD format. And as this was Gunpei Yokoi's final release, when the WonderSwan came out, which is something that Koto Labs were working on alongside Bandai, they actually released a launch game called Gunpei as a tribute to Gunpei Yokoi, and the game itself is actually a reimagining of Professor Heno Heno, so it is a very nice tribute to him. And of course, the Gunpei series went on to span many different sequels across many different consoles as well, so it's really great that his ideas live on today. And going back to these LCD releases, these were actually created for a company called Hero, and these are only 2 of a set of LCD games that came out all around the same time, and they're sort of collectibles, so I would love to try and get my hands on the other releases, and you can be guaranteed that if I ever do that, I will definitely make a video right here. So if you are interested in seeing the other LCD games for Hero, let me know down in the comments below, and maybe over time that is something that I can put my mind to. I would really love to check the other games out. And just like the Game & Watch games that came before it, both of these actually have 2 different game modes. They have Mode A, which is more of a puzzle-focused mode, with individual levels and actual goals to achieve, and then they also have a Mode B, which is an unlimited, endless mode where the game just constantly gets faster and faster and progressively gets more and more difficult as well. Both the game modes are fantastic, and even if you've only got 5 minutes or if you've got half an hour, they're both super fun to play, and it really does go back to Gunpei Yokoi's original message of using withered technology to make really interesting games in the modern age. And I'm so glad that he had a chance to revisit these ideas for fun standalone games before he passed away. It really seems like these 2 titles were exactly the path that he wanted to take with his career. And thankfully I found this interview in 1997, just before he passed away, and he seemed very happy about their performance, and he was so glad that people still enjoyed simple games, as well as big blockbuster console releases at the time as well. There is definitely room for both. It's also fantastic to see that Koto Laboratory is still around, and even more interestingly than that, I actually found out that an old Nintendo employee joined Koto Laboratory in 2006, so about 10 years after Gunpei Yokoi passed away, and he was still talking about how much Yokoi meant to the company, and they've still been following his ideas up until this day. But even more interestingly than that, he then left Koto Labs to spin up his own company in 2010 called Mono Koto, which looks like an offshoot, and it even shares the same philosophy that Yokoi stated all those years ago. And they also work closely with Bandai and make LCD games, so it all comes full circle. And even though Yokoi is no longer with us, his legacy really does live on in the Japanese gaming landscape. If you enjoyed this and you want even more history of Koto Labs, and especially the WonderSwan in particular, then I did a deep dive into the history of the system, and there's a lot more about Gunpei Yokoi in that too, so click the video up there and watch that one next.